The first thing people noticed about Daniel Carter was his silence. Not the awkward kind, not the kind that came from shyness or insecurity, but a polished, controlled silence, the kind worn by men who had learned long ago that words were liabilities. In boardrooms with glass walls and views of the city stretching endlessly below, Daniel spoke only when necessary. When he did, people leaned in. He was wealthy in the way America recognizes instantly: tailored suits, private elevators, dinners where menus didn't show prices, a name that carried weight without explanation. At 48, he had built an empire in logistics and infrastructure, the invisible machinery that kept cities breathing. Trucks moved. Ports opened. Contracts closed. Money flowed. And yet, when the meetings ended and the lights dimmed, Daniel went home to a penthouse that felt more like a hotel room than a life. At night, the city glittered outside his windows, millions of lives glowing and moving, but inside there was only the low hum of appliances and the echo of his own footsteps. No photographs lined the walls. No shoes by the door that weren't his. No laughter trapped in the corners. He would pour a drink he barely tasted and stand there, watching reflections of himself in the glass, older than he remembered feeling, younger than he felt inside. He had everything people said mattered, and nothing that made it feel like it did. Across the city, miles away from clean glass and quiet elevators, Maria Alvarez woke up before the sun every morning in a studio apartment that smelled faintly of damp concrete and old cooking oil. The heater worked when it wanted to. The walls were thin enough that she knew her neighbors' arguments by heart. At 36, her body already carried the weight of years that had been unkind: long shifts, cheap food, stress that never fully left her chest. She worked 2 jobs when she could get them, cleaning offices at night and serving food at a diner during the day. Some weeks she slept 4 hours a night. Some weeks she cried in the shower so no one would hear. Maria had lost more than most people knew. Her husband had died in a construction accident 8 years earlier, crushed by a beam that shouldn't have fallen. The settlement money disappeared quickly: medical bills, rent, survival. Her son, Luis, grew up faster than he should have, learning to be quiet when the fridge was empty, learning not to ask for things. And yet, Maria still said good morning to strangers. She still split her food when someone looked hungrier than she was. She still believed, somehow, that kindness mattered even when it didn't pay rent. Daniel and Maria lived in the same city but might as well have existed in different universes. Their paths crossed without touching, separated by layers of money, perception, and invisible rules. Until the night Daniel's world cracked open in a way no balance sheet could fix. It started with a phone call that came too late. A federal investigation. Frozen accounts. Partners who stopped answering messages. Lawyers who suddenly sounded careful instead of confident. Daniel sat in his office long after everyone had gone home, the city dark and distant below him, as the realization settled in slowly, painfully. It wasn't just money. It was trust. It was reputation. It was the fragile illusion of control he had built his entire identity on. The company collapsed faster than he imagined possible, like a structure hollowed out from the inside. Lawsuits followed. Assets were seized. Friends disappeared. Invitations stopped coming. When Daniel finally walked out of his penthouse for the last time, carrying a single bag, the doorman avoided his eyes. The fall was not dramatic. There were no headlines with his face splashed across them, no public apology, no redemption arc. Just silence. Just doors closing one by one. He rented a small room at first, then another, cheaper one. Pride kept him from asking for help. Shame kept him isolated. He told himself it was temporary, that he'd rebuild, that he always did. But weeks turned into months, and the world he had known no longer recognized him. The night Daniel slept on the street for the first time, it was colder than he expected. Cold in a way that crept into his bones and stayed there. The concrete pressed back against him, unforgiving, indifferent. The city sounded different from down there, louder, harsher, more alive and less caring all at once. People passed without looking. Others looked too long, eyes full of judgment or discomfort. Daniel pulled his coat tighter and stared up at the sky, barely visible between buildings, and felt something break inside him that money had once kept intact. Maria saw him outside the diner one morning, sitting stiffly on the curb, his posture still betraying a life of comfort he no longer possessed. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for anything. He just sat there, eyes distant, hands clenched as if holding onto something no one else could see. She recognized that look. The look of someone who had fallen far and hadn't figured out how to land. She brought him a cup of coffee without a word. Their first conversation was brief, almost nothing. A nod. A quiet thank you. But over days, then weeks, they began to speak more. About the weather. About work. About nothing important and everything at once. Daniel never said who he had been. Maria never asked. On the street, pasts mattered less than whether you would survive the night. Hunger taught Daniel humility faster than any courtroom ever could. Rejection stripped away the last layers of ego. Cold nights taught him how loud silence could be. And Maria, in her quiet, persistent way, showed him a kind of wealth he had never learned to recognize: shared meals, unspoken understanding, dignity in survival. What Daniel didn't know yet was that his fall was not over. And Maria didn't know that the man she shared coffee with carried a truth that would eventually force both of them to make a choice that would change everything. The city watched silently, indifferent and eternal, as two lives moved closer together, unaware that pain, loyalty, and sacrifice were slowly pulling them toward a moment neither of them could escape.